Welcome back, DIY friends. In today's video, I'll be showing you how we bring together 5 beautiful Connie lines and designs rice papers with 5 unfinished wood products. All of these are from our CNC DIY Factory website, and we'll create unique, layered home decor pieces. Today we'll be playing with milk paint and oil wax, stamps, and watercolor on rice paper. Plus, we're adding extra character with fast casting resin, some stain blending, and a few surprise transfers. These projects are packed with creative techniques I know you're going to love. If you're new to the channel, I'm Cindy, my husband is Chris. Welcome to CNC DIY Factory. If you're inspired and enjoy this content, please give us a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It truly helps our small business grow. For Project 1, we are using the Oriole Multiple Rice Paper from Connie Lines and Designs along with our 4x6 Farmhouse style maker's frame. Both of these items can be found at our cncdiyfactory.com website, and I will have them linked in the description box below. We are also using Sweet Pickins milk paint in Sweet Potato, along with DIY paint in Sandy Blonde. When working with raw wood and milk paint, I like to put a coat of paint on the wood before adding the milk paint. My first choice is the DIY paint, simply because it's my favorite chalk or clay style paint. Milk paint is a 1-to-1 ratio of the powder paint to water. I am using 1 scoop of the milk paint to 1 scoop of water. This will need to be mixed very well. I like to use a milk frother to mix my paint, but you can use whatever you like. Once it is mixed well, I will set it aside for about 10 minutes to thicken up. The first coat of milk paint can go on a little streaky, but the second coat grabs onto the first coat for a beautiful coverage. I use a heat gun to quickly dry the milk paint between coats. I feel this helps the crazing and crackle appear in the milk paint. And this is what the milk paint looks like after 2 coats and a heat gun to quickly dry the paint. I want this to be a little more distressed on the edges and the milk paint to be silky smooth, so I am using a 220 sandpaper and sanding the entire frame and the backer board, concentrating on the edges and the corners of the frame to bring back some of the sandy blonde underneath. I painted the back side of the backer board in the sweet potato milk paint and the front side in a white chalk paint. I want the colors in the rice paper to be bright, and the white chalk paint provides a bright background for that. I'm running my thumb along the edge of the backer board to crease the rice paper so that I know where I should trim it to fit my backer board. Once I have the rice paper trimmed up, I will decoupage this to the backer board using my go-to decoupage medium, DIY Liquid Patina. I start with folding back a portion of the rice paper, laying down an even layer of liquid patina, then I spritz my paper and smooth it down with my paintbrush. And I will continue this in sections until I have the entire paper adhered. This is my favorite process to keep from having wrinkles or bubbles in my decoupage. Milk paint needs to be sealed, and you can use any type of sealer you want. I really like the Sweet Pickins oil wax, and I usually use the dark formula, but today I'm going to try out the white formula. I'm hoping this will soften the sweet potato color and settle into the crazing of the milk paint for a more farmhouse shabby chic feel. I'll either use an old chip brush or a sponge applicator to apply the oil wax. I lay down a nice layer of the oil wax and allow it to soak into the milk paint for about 10 minutes. Once it has time to soak in, I simply wipe off the excess. Be sure to use an extra shop towel to hold the project, or you could end up embedding your fingerprints into the milk paint. Now it is time to put this together. I am using a frame tacker from Amazon, and this is the perfect tool when working with any type of upcycled or new frame. I'll have a link to this in the description box below. And here is the finished project. I think the white oil wax really helped make this farmhouse style maker's frame and the Oriole rice paper into a beautiful shabby chic home decor piece. For project 2, we are using the Bluebird Multiple from Connie Lines and Designs rice paper, along with our unfinished wood faux book. Both of these can be found on our website at cncdiyfactory.com, and I will have them linked below. I'm starting off with crinoline from DIY Paint and adding 1 coat to the front cover and along the pages of this book. This handcrafted unfinished wood faux book is a timeless piece made with care by Chris at CNC DIY Factory. It is built to last and beautifully detailed. It's the perfect blank canvas for your creativity. Whether you paint it, stamp it, or stain it for a rustic look, it's a charming, sturdy accent that will truly stand the test of time. Connie uses DIY paint when she hand paints her designs for the rice paper. I am wanting to stay with colors that she used, so I'm using Hey Sailor DIY paint for the cover of this book to try to match the bluebird in her paper. The DIY clay-based paint has so much pigment in it that I only need to use 1 coat for full coverage. I love the versatility the multiple images offer with Connie's papers. I'm using the larger image on this faux book, but I will have 2 other images to use for other projects. I am using the water method to trim one side of the rice paper. This will be going along the hinge of the book, and I want it to blend naturally. The frayed edge allows this to blend smoothly with no harsh lines. Once I have that one side of the rice paper trimmed up, I will decoupage this to the book using my go-to decoupage medium, liquid patina. I start with folding back a portion of the rice paper, laying down an even layer of the liquid patina, spritzing my paper and smoothing it down with my paintbrush, being sure to smooth the frayed edge along the hinge. The rice paper is so strong that I am able to lift it up and reposition it if I need to without worrying about tearing the paper. Once the decoupage is completely dry, I will take my finger sander and in a downward motion, sand off the excess paper along the remaining 3 sides. All of these handcrafted books have natural knots or wormholes in the wood, which makes for a unique look for each book. I want to add some distressing to this book to give it a more vintage feel, so I'm using a stamp that I bought from Amazon and the IOD ink in stone gray. I love the soft look of the stone gray on this cover, and I could have stopped here, and I wish I had sometimes, but I decided to go ahead and stamp a little bit more. I want to title this book Love of Birds, so I line up my IOD apothecary letter stamps on the cover of the book and lift them off using the thin mount. I reached for the IOD black ink, but changed course and grabbed the stone gray. I wish I had used the black for this because the title was too faint to see. So I restamped it with the black ink, but I could not see well enough to line it up correctly, and I had a double image. Not to worry, Bob Ross says there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. So let's see what I can make out of this happy accident. I grabbed my Hey Sailor DIY paint and created a bit of watercolor on my palette. I used a soft brush and added some of the paint over the stamped words, then using a paper towel, I blotted off the excess. I continued to do this with the blue paint, and then I added in some of the sandy blonde from DIY just to tone it down a little bit and try to blend it more with the background of the rice paper. Then I decided the bird needed a little shading, so I used some weathered wood by DIY and created a shadow around the bird. It may not be my best work, but I feel it leans a bit to the vintage 1960s pop art era. What do you think? Now for the edges of the pages. I'm using the DIY liquid patina golden ticket. This will bring a little vintage elegance to this book. I finished the book off with DIY clear wax, followed that with Howard's chalk teak wax in dark to add a bit more of the vintage vibe. And here is what I am calling my vintage 1960s pop art era book. These books can become anything you want them to be. Let me know what you would create with one. For project 3, we are using Connie's forest floor stacked rice paper and our medium-sized unfinished wood tag. And both of these can be found on our website, and I will have them linked below. I'm going to start by staining the entire tag with Minwax water-based stain in Legacy Brown. This stain can be found at Lowe's and Menards. I'll use my water mister to moisten the stain in order to pull back some of the color from the tag. I don't want the dark stain color to show through my rice paper, so I'm painting the back of the paper with a white paint, and I'm using Victorian Lace by Fusion. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to trim the paper to the size I need for the tag. I want a frayed edge, but I also want it to be straight, so I'm using my metal ruler with the cork backing, and I'm flipping it upside down onto the rice paper. I can then pull the edge of the paper up and it will tear evenly along the ruler, leaving a frayed edge. The mushrooms in this paper are adorable, and I want to bring those out in a 3D fashion on this tag. I'm using Alumilite fast casting resin along with my IOD mold Toadstool. This resin is a 1-to-1 ratio, so however much of part A is used, you have to use the same amount of part B. Once you have added the two components together, you have about 30 seconds to stir it thoroughly and then pour it into the mold. This sets up completely in about 10 minutes, and then they can be popped out of the mold and used. Please be sure to wear protective gloves, follow the recommended procedures, and protect your surface when using a chemical such as this. Once I figure out which mushrooms I want to use and their placement on the tag, I'm going to decoupage the rice paper to the tag. I'm using my favorite decoupage medium, DIY liquid patina, and I start by placing my rice paper right where I want it, fold back a portion of it, and lay down an even layer of liquid patina. I spritz my rice paper, smooth it down with my brush, and I usually work it in sections until the paper is completely adhered. To paint the mushrooms, I'm using all DIY paint colors. Connie uses DIY paint to create her paintings for her rice paper, and I want to stay with the colors that I think she is using here. I am using Crinoline, Marquee, Sandy Blonde, and Hay Sailor. Because the DIY paint is so pigmented, I wanted to go ahead and seal these mushrooms with DIY clear wax, followed by Howard's chalk teak wax in dark. This will keep any paint from reactivating with the wax and bleeding onto my rice paper. Once the wax has set a bit, I'm going to use Titebond Quick and Thick to adhere the mushrooms to the tag. I add a small amount to the back of the mushroom and feather it to the edges so as to keep any glue from squishing out. I'm going to seal up the rest of the tag using the DIY clear wax and then follow that with the Howard's Chalk Teak Wax in dark. To give this tag a little more whimsy, I'm going to add a tassel. I'm using ripped up sari silk and mesh in a creamy white. This would look great with red and/or blue added to the tassel as well. But wait, I'm not done yet. I think this needs a little yellow tag added to the top. So I cut out a small tag of cardstock and stamped it with a scribbled bird from an old stamp set that I have. Then I'm running the tag through a crimping tool that I have had since my scrapbooking days, and I'm adding this to the tassel. And now we have a fun and whimsical tag, and the colors are perfect for patriotic decor as well as everyday decor. For Project 4, we are using Connie Lines and Designs Grosbeak Multiple and our unfinished large door tags, which come in a set of 2. Both of these items can be found at cncdiyfactory.com, and I will have the link below. For this tag, we are going to be stain blending. I am using Minwax water-based stain in a variety of colors to try to achieve a complementing background for the rice paper. I'm starting with the Colton blue and adding in a little bit of navy blue. I will use the navy blue around the edge and keep a moist edge to the stain, blending it with the center stain. I don't want to see any hard lines in my stain from one color to the next, so the water mister is a must to keep the stain from drying too quickly. I will add a little bit of the pure white to the center of my tag to keep my light source in the middle, and then I'll work the stain around to blend it in for a nice soft glow. Once I have the basic blending done, I will add true black to the outside edge and then blend that in just slightly. The rice paper has a little bit of a sandy blonde look in some areas. To try to mimic this, I will use golden oak and just lightly dab some onto the tag in a couple of places, and then I'll pull back some of the color to give it a washed out or faded look. And I think that stain blending is just what I wanted. I want to really make this grosbeak the focal point of this tag. So I went to my laser and I created an ornate frame for him. I'm also using 2 different sizes of ornate labels below the frame. The file for these labels came from my friend Natalie at Sparks of Joy Studios. Once I have my rice paper trimmed to the size that I need, I'm going to find my placement for it on my tag. Then, using my favorite decoupage medium, DIY liquid patina, I'm going to fold back a section of the rice paper, lay down an even layer of liquid patina, spritz my paper, and smooth it out with my brush, and continue until I have the entire piece of rice paper adhered to the tag. I love the red feathers on the throat of this bird, and I want to give a nod to this aspect of the paper. So I'm using Marquee from DIY to paint the frame and the large ornate label. Then I'm going to cover that up with the golden ticket liquid patina from DIY. The gold over the red is one of my favorite combinations of colors. I love how the gold has an antiqued look while the red still peeks out from underneath. The smaller ornate label was painted with the Sandy Blonde by DIY and is now getting a dry brushing around the edges with the Hey Sailor by DIY. This gives the label a little bit of definition while pulling the blue in to complete the ensemble. The next step is to adhere the labels and the frame to the tag. I am using a CA glue in the thick formula. It doesn't take much glue and it holds very nicely. I could not come up with anything to put on the label other than the name of the bird. And I think it is very fitting, but you'll have to let me know what you would have put on the label. Off camera, I added a bow with a hanger made from some ribbon that I found at Hobby Lobby, and I attached it to the top of the tag. I don't know what the ribbon is called, but it looks like the outer layer of bark, and I just thought it was fitting. This door tag was so fun to make. If you had any Connie Lines and Designs rice paper to use on this tag, which one would you use? For our fifth and final project today, I am using 2 of the Wren Multiple Connie Lines and Designs rice papers and 1 of our unfinished small wood toolbox or tote. Both of these can be found on our cncdiyfactory.com website and will be linked below. I love our design of this tote because the handle can come out for easy painting or staining. I am starting off with staining this tote and the handle with Minwax water-based stain in Legacy Brown. This is my favorite brown color stain and I use this a lot. The Minwax can be found at Lowe's and Menards and is tinted at the paint counter. This is a water-based stain, so it is safe to use indoors and it is not combustible. I wanted the full color on the handle, but for the tote, I want to pull some of the color back, so I use my misting bottle to wet the stain and then wipe the excess away, leaving the wood a beautiful light brown color. I'm going to be using Sweet Pickins milk paint on this tote over top of the stain. I like to have a barrier for the milk paint when working with raw wood, so the milk paint has less of a chance of soaking into the wood and providing a crackle and crazing effect that I love with the milk paint. I didn't have the exact color I wanted for this tote in the milk paint, so I am mixing 3 colors to see if I can create my own custom color. I am using Willow, In a Pickle, and Ocean. Milk paint is a 1-to-1 ratio, so however much powder you use, you will need to use the same amount of water. You will want to mix it thoroughly and then set it aside for 10 minutes to thicken up. Once it's at about a melted milkshake consistency, it's time to use it. I can tell right now that this is not the exact color that I'm wanting. This is more of a green blue, and I want a blue green. So we'll see how this turns out after I dry it. Well, it's a beautiful color, but not exactly what I wanted, so I'm going to add a bit more ocean to the mix along with the same amount of water and see where this gets me. Oh yeah, that's the color I'm looking for. Isn't that beautiful? I absolutely love the fact that we can mix the milk paint to make custom colors. I mentioned at the beginning that I was using 2 of Connie's Ren multiple rice papers. I want to put one on each end of this tote. I wanted the edges to have a frayed look, so I'm using my metal ruler with cork backing to help make a straight line with my water pen, and then I'll fray the edges of both papers. Once I have the rice paper trimmed down, I'm going to use my DIY liquid patina and apply it to the top portion on the back of the rice paper. I don't want to apply the liquid patina anywhere on the milk paint that the rice paper won't cover, just in case I want to use a wax to seal the milk paint. The liquid patina will leave a distinct finish that does not blend well with waxes. Once I have the top adhered, I can then add the liquid patina over the milk paint and smooth down the rice paper. Once I have the rice paper adhered to both ends of the tote, I will take this out to the shop and sand it down to give it a nice distress. I want some florals on this tote, so I pulled out my IOD Lost Garden transfer set and I found matching florals for the sides and the ends of this tote. This first set of florals are perfect at the top of the rice paper. If you haven't used transfers yet, they are such an easy product to use and can bring just the right touch to any project. You simply peel off the white backing, lay your transfer on the surface, and rub the transfer stick over the top to release the image from the carrier sheet and onto your project. Once you have the image transferred, you just rub the carrier sheet over top of it to burnish it into the surface. The second set of transfers for the sides of this tote need to be trimmed down to fit. The carrier sheets on these transfers have grid lines, and that makes it easy to trim the transfer to the perfect size. All of my transfers have been added to the tote, and now it's time to give them a light sanding so they do not look quite so pristine and perfect. To seal and protect this tote, I am using the DIY clear wax, and I will follow that up with the Howard's Chalk Teak Wax in dark to give it the distressed, worn, vintage feel. Once the tote is all sealed up, all I need to do is add the handle and insert the pegs to hold it in place, and this tote is complete. And here is the finished product. I cannot believe how beautifully the custom milk paint color complements the colors in this rice paper. This one is by far my favorite project today. And here is the final reveal of all 5 projects together. I would love to know what you think of these projects and if you have a favorite. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you loved today's projects as much as I did. If you're feeling inspired, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the fun. I'd also love for you to join me live on Facebook every Thursday night at 6:30 Central, where we craft together, chat, and get creative in real time. It's always a good time and full of inspiration. And remember, all of the rice papers, unfinished wood products, and tons of other creative goodies are available on our website at www.cncdiyfactory.com. Go check it out and grab what you need to make your own beautiful pieces. Until next time, Keep practicing random acts of crafting. Bye for now.